Entrepreneurship, you described it beautifully. I mean, it is really, entrepreneurs, going out and creating your own business, and everything. Whereas entrepreneurship, it's almost like creating a business within a business, right? And that could be a new product, it could be a new service, it could be a net new, just like complete separate business within the business. But like you say, it is taking on that responsibility, right? And so there are similarities, but there are definitely differences. As an entrepreneur, you're fortunate to have sort of the backing and the tools of the larger organization and the network of the larger organization.
Welcome back to Meta Rick, where we talk about emerging technologies, mostly from a go-to-market perspective. Big focus on metaverse, XR, spatial computing, with a little overlap on artificial intelligence and Web3 and some of these other pieces of deep tech as well. Today's guest is an amazing leader in the space. We have Val Vacante, who is an award-winning creative catalyst and global innovator. She's the VP of Solutions and Innovation at Dentsu. Her role, she uncovers cultural trends, commerce dynamics, and emerging technologies to shape the next generation of product innovations and solutions. And I love that in your bio, you talk about not just digital, but also how we connect and experience both the physical and digital world. I think that's really under talked about when we think about this 3D immersive internet, is that it's more than just how we go deeper into screens. It's also how do we take those screens and those digital experiences out and put them in these physical environments too. So very, very excited to get into your story and hear a little bit more about what you're working on. But maybe we can get started by hearing more from you on your current role and kind of what you're doing at Dentsu.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on the show. You do such a great job with great content and really showing people creating what's next. So I'm honored to be here today. So thank you, first of all. In terms of my role, so I'm Val Vacante, VP Solutions Innovation at Dentsu, and I'm very fortunate that my role is all about creating new products, productized services, and really helping our team and clients really live one foot into the future. So it's kind of a fancy way of saying an explorer, an experimenter.
I love that. There's this little soundbite. When I first heard about you and your role with Dentsu was the launch you guys did with Microsoft and with Head Office Space about, I think it was like a year ago, something like that. And there's this little quote that you said where it's like the metaverse is near but not here, and you're all about helping companies build what's next and create things that have never existed before. And I love that idea, and I'm kind of jealous. Like, it's such a cool role to be an experimenter with these resources to really build out these massive projects. But maybe before we get into the specifics of any of those projects and the things you're doing at Dentsu, just tell us a little bit about your personal background. Talk through your career and how you kind of got involved with these emerging technologies.
So I started a while ago, we'll say, and when I first started my career, it was actually at J. Walter Thompson, and it was at a time when sort of digital or interactive, however you described it at the time, was almost not even considered, or if it was kind of like where people were sort of pulling like whatever they had left over to maybe do this thing in the digital space. And we were creating new platforms and new experiences way back then. And so the common thread throughout my career is really creating those connected experiences. So back then we called it offline, online. So how do you connect the direct mail to the online gaming experience? Sort of fast forward a bit, and that was I started my career in the UK. I came back to the US and was fortunate to again work in both physical and digital worlds. Everything with like brands with Nestle, and how do we have sort of parents and children interacting together, and gaming together. And then fast forward even further, I came to Austin, Texas, and I'm originally a Texan. So I just tell people it took me a really long way to get home. But I came to Austin in 2005. And that's really when this notion of creating sort of products and productized services, when you say we discovered each other. um, and at the time, that is when, like, I'm kind of dating myself here, right? This was like pre-iPhone. So when we, pre-iPhone, I thought that, hey, this mobile marketing thing's going to take off, which is kind of funny to say now. But I actually brought in the technology, brought in the infrastructure, and created. We were able to offer mobile marketing to brands at events, and again connect that sort of physical and digital world, and then sort of segued into multicultural marketing for a number of years with big brands and social and all kinds of cool tech we were doing at the time. But where it got really interesting, um, was I pivoted to more of a product role where that's what I did. So I was fortunate to work with a lot of IoT technology at the time. And it was quite interesting because I was working on a connected bed for kids for Sleep Number. So my son was actually testing out these beds. So we would like schlep in new prototypes, and we're like, okay, like testing it out and seeing like what is that physical digital experience. My son did discover that the head tilt could turn your bed into a slide. That was not the intent, but so we had a lot of fun with that. And then also, just a number at that time. Again, that's when IoT, it was like there was connected everything. So I always tell people about that time period of my life. It was very much like Doc Brown in Back to the Future. Everything was connected, and at one point, my husband's like, is there anything in here that's not connected? But it's because these are products, like you have to live the product, right? So when you're creating it and you're creating that experience, it's like, from retail, you need to be in the store. When you're creating the product, you need to live it, right? And to me, it's like, you can't create for me, maybe there's other people who've cracked this, but for me, it's like you have to live that experience to create a great product. And then there was a bit where I went out on my own and became an entrepreneur, and that was a completely different learning, Ricky. I mean, that was like, what is the legal paperwork, what is the marketing, oh, by the way, you're doing business development, and oh, you're doing the delivery of it, and oh, you're doing it all. Which I learned a tremendous amount, and was fortunate to work with brands like Bandai Namco, Mattel, Hasbro. And that was when I sort of got into the VR world. And I worked in uh, enterprise construction sort of architecture, from like a B2B enterprise, hardcore, like how are companies designing, with VR experiences, having those, like how are architects and designers having those shared experiences. Like
When you
that's a
say
very hard work.
when you say architect, just to clarify, are we talking about like architects like designing, constructing buildings, or like software architecture?
Buildings, great question. Great clarifying question. Yeah, because it could be both in this world, right?
Yeah, built. I mean,
um,
architecture of buildings is an amazing use case. I feel like they've been so ahead of the curve when it comes to 3D modeling because, I mean, they feel the pain point so much more and more directly, at least, when you think about the costs of prototyping. Like they were building out physical to scale 3D models. Like I was just talking to a guy from the spatial computing team at AWS, and most of his background was in architecture and 3D design. And it was interesting to hear like a lot of their projects, they literally are creating these physical to scale models in like a wood shop in order to be able to model out and test the building before going to actual construction. So 3D CAD files and Revit files and all of that makes so much sense for that space.
it was incredible, and yeah, just the, like you say, the time, the cost savings, the creativity, because like you say, immediately it's like, do you want don't do it around building, whatever, do you want the sphere like they have in Las Vegas? What do it's all possible and quick, right? So like I kind of started out, in VR in that space. And then interestingly, I was fortunate to work with Merge, for focused for kids, sort of ages 10 plus. And so everything from, the mobile VR headset. So, right. So going from like a HoloLens type experience, even I was working in some AR glasses at the time as well. So like Vue6, who continue to do a great job in the AR glasses space, but like working in that world. So then like, oh, okay, now we have to make like putting your sort of parent and child mindset on, okay, you have affordability, right? Accessibility. And Merge just did a great job of creating both AR and VR glasses with the power of this thing here. So it was affordable.
Is Merge is
And
that a hardware company? Or I'm sorry, I'm unfamiliar.
Oh, okay. They do both actually. So they actually have the squishy. I'll send you a link because as soon as you see it, you'll be like, oh, okay, I know.
Okay, nice.
But they have these squishy VR and AR headsets. And the way it was designed is that it could be both. So if you bought a headset, it could function as both. And then also there was the Merge Cube that was around. This was several years ago, but it was a squishy cube, and you could use your phone and scan it. And then there was different games you could hold the cube, and it might have the solar system, or it might have a Minecraft-like game, that you could build on as well. So they did a great job of sort of education as well as gaming. And I was fortunate to work across all their different products, experiences, and even working on launching different experiences from their community as well. So really like a robust experience. And then from there, again, continuing to work a lot in AR with different brands like Hasbro. There was the Nerf Laser Ops. I don't know if you remember that one, but it was basically a think of it as like Nerf meets laser tag, but there's also an AR experience that goes with it.
Yeah, Nerf is such an iconic brand. I mean, it's incredible that you when you get to work with these brands like this, there's such an impact that happens at scale from those projects, right? Like we tie childhood memories, like core pieces of our daily lives to these products. Like these are really integrated into society. And so the way that they tell their stories, the way that they engage with their customers is really important, right? Like you want to be able to keep elevating that connection. The way that you connect with your customer, the way you connect internally with your employees needs to match that brand identity and just like how iconic they really are, right?
You're absolutely right. And that's what you said there about memories. That's one of the things that and I still do enjoy working in toys, games, and gaming, right? Because you are creating those memories, whether it's like a parent and child playing, a board game, like, and I was really fortunate that I got to work on a lot of like AR board games and all kinds of stuff. And some of the stuff made it to market, some of it didn't. Some of it was everything from technology scouting, ideation to um, sort of experience design and testing. Uh, and I joke that I have a whole closet in there of different sort of projects. Some were amazing successes, some weren't, but that's part of it. When you're in innovation and you're creating new things, you have to have that mindset. So
What's and it's okay if you don't want to answer this question, but what's one example of like one of the biggest flops you've ever seen that like you thought it was going to work out? You're like, this is a piece of emerging technology that's going to be great, but then it turns out it just wasn't able to quite hit the ground running.
So I can't say specifics, but
Yeah, like I said, it's
um,
fair. I know that could be a hot take, so if you want to pass on it, that's okay.
well, no, and this is when I was sort of prior to joining Dentsu. One of the things that I had, I was working um, with another, like partnered up with another company. We created some phenomenal tech. I mean, I was very proud of it. We had a number of meetings. We went out, and this is just something like when you're an entrepreneur, no matter what industry you're in, to always be mindful of, right? So we went out, we had great meetings. Everybody's excited. Everybody did the follow ups and all this stuff. Um, and it was something out of our control, but what we learned is the big company that we were showing to, and somebody said, they said, Val, our team's been trying to crack this for like 4 years, and you guys kind of came in and made it look really easy, and the project went nowhere.
Oh, what? I mean, that seems
I
like a
mean,
huge compliment. Is that like a so did it flop because it sounds like it didn't flop because it didn't work. It was more like a political issue.
it was, yeah, yeah, and you can't control those things, and so the learning on our part is we didn't uh, they invested so much thought or love and care into that opportunity. But what it really taught me is that that's one, you can't fall in love with any of your creations, ever. You can, you know you just have to make sure, like, let them go.
Mhm.
You always have to try and let them go, right?
Yeah, what's that Stephen King
And then
quote? It's like kill your darlings, right? It's like you can create all of the ideas, but when you want to create masterpiece, it really comes down to the ideas you let go of, and what remains is the art, right? So you always end up having to let go of these ideas you're so passionate about if you want to get to something that's really amazing and can actually impact the world.
you're so, yeah, you're so right. And it was one of those moments, right? And so what it taught me is, what I mentioned there is, being able to let go. But then it also really gave me a positive push to think about um, the importance of scale, and then thinking about, applying, um, being more modular in design.
Mm.
And that really accelerated a lot of the work and creativity that I did. So
That kind of ties into
there's pluses and minuses in the story.
yeah, yeah, and there always is, right? Every great thing has a cost associated with it, like nothing that just comes at all perfection. But we were talking a lot about these like creative ideas and like how to get ideas approved, and there's a balance there, right? Like coming up with new exciting ideas are often met with pushback, right? Like in order to disrupt something, well, just think about that word disrupt. People don't want to be disrupted. People don't want chaos. They want organization. They want to stay clean and have control over their processes. And especially when you talk about really big, like Fortune 100 brands, right? Like you're managing hundreds of thousands of employees sometimes. And in order to do that, little tiny changes in process have a lot of unintended consequences. So change is really scary, really, really scary when you're talking about scale. The tiniest little security breaches, the ability to make things stable. Like there's so many things that block a new idea from working. So when you're working with the biggest brands in the world, and you're working on the most cutting edge, unproven technologies where you're kind of proving out the future and getting us ahead, how do you balance creativity and pushing boundaries with staying like pragmatic and doing things that'll get approval and can actually become a reality?
Yeah, for sure. It's just such a great question, right? Getting things done. How do Yes, it's such a great question. And what I'll say is, where I've had a lot of success is, really starting small. Like, I mean, before I dive in, I guess it's always great to live into the future, like to explore it and live in there. But then it's like, okay, take that inspiration, then how can we apply it to the today? How can we apply it to the specific business challenge, right? um, and that's kind of the lens that I have. And I also think, it's having a test and learn mindset and going into new technologies. Really a now, near, next approach. So what can we do now, that's sort of lightweight, low risk, right? Test in a safe environment. Like, and I say, together, right? Together, we shape, like, define what that sort of, excuse me, that small POC looks like, that proof of concept. What does that look like? What does it feel like? What problem are we trying to solve? And really just make it focused. This is all we're going to do here. This is it. That's the now. And this is what it means to the business now. The near, okay? So based on the learnings here, that's what the near phase is going to be. Again, really kind of putting some not lock it in, but having some guardrails, right? Like, if we, based on our sort of hypothesis and what we're learning here, the near phase, we want to focus on whether it's the next initiative, a bigger initiative, that type of thing. Cool. And then the next is really, again, taking those learnings and evolving them. That could be different media touch points. It could be, maybe you test out with one brand and it's bringing it to a portfolio of brands, so it kind of depends on the situation. But framework wise, excuse me, having that kind of like now, near, next approach, and also tying it back to the business, right? And just working with those key stakeholders along the way. And it is quite fun sometimes, because it's, everybody, on the team gets excited, right?
Mm-hmm.
All around our partners are like, oh, what if we did? Oh, what if we did? And it's like, oh yeah. And it's kind of like, it's all possible, but like,
But
well, where does
eventually,
that fit in here?
eventually you have constraints, you have timelines, you have budgets, that you have technology limitations. Like, there's so many things that get in the way where, like, we could do anything. Yes, we want to have that can do attitude and like come up with all these great big ideas, but we do have to like remember the realities if we ever want to get to those big ideas, right? So I love that framework that you just outlined of like the now, near, what was the third one? Now, near,
Next.
next. Oh my
Now,
God.
near, next.
It's so easy to remember. What am I doing? Now, near, next. So I really love that framework. And I'm wondering if we could, it doesn't need to be a real example of like an actual project. If you have one, great. But if we could put it through like a virtual reality example, like let's say it's either a WebXR activation or a virtual reality activation. What's like a general idea of the type of stakeholders that would be involved in that now versus next, now, near, next process? Like, could you walk us through like a real world example?
um Sort of, yeah. I mean, you said for XR
Yeah,
specifically.
yeah. Let's say an XR program of sorts, either training or it could be like a marketing activation, like a gaming thing. It could be anything related to it, but something to do with a 3D kind of immersive experience.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, you touched on Dentsu NXT Space earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's a perfect example. With Dentsu NXT Space, we actually we teamed up with Microsoft and head office space and created this sort of virtual environment space, and it was intentionally created to enable brands to sort of test, learn, and explore, you know, a different technologies, right? So we were obviously using Microsoft, a number of Microsoft technologies. We were using Unreal 5. We created our own AI powered virtual ambassador named Neva, who would guide you through the experience. And we created different spaces in there for the different use cases, right? So just from a fundamental education standpoint. showcasing how, how might you create a virtual retail space. And we even had things where people could use their phone and scan and get information on products. So again, showing that, that connected experience of like, oh, I'm in a virtual environment. And actually, when we created that, headsets weren't required. We really wanted to make it more accessible to more people, so they could get more familiar. So you could use this thing here, your desktop. You could use this thing here, if you wanted to. If you did want to put a headset on, that's cool, but not mandatory. And what we would do, the way we designed the different areas, um, there were different browser based screens in there. So we could quickly prototype an idea or a concept and put it in the environment, and then, invite different brands, to come into the space themselves. We actually, one of the tests that we did, it was a company, and they had their executive leadership team meeting, in the environment. And so like
It's
they learned how they were dancing, and and they had their presentation up, and sort of went through that. But we were able to make it a safe closed space for them, right? From a security standpoint, we were able to sort of make it a small test and learn way to do it. Again, closed space, limited kind of scope, and then talking with them like, um, what are the goals of this, right? And so that was very much like a now phase. And then a near was looking at, how might they do different events, right? And then the next is actually kind of like implementing ongoing sort of scheduled events. So like that's one kind of tangible example of how we created a test space for that.
Yeah, I like that a lot because it's this investment up front of showing what's possible and like kind of creating this initial step where people can kind of get a glimpse into it. And I feel like once people get a glimpse into these 3D experiences and the potential use cases of them, they start to come up with so many ideas of like, this is a pain point in our business that this could help with, and here's another one. And I think I used to do a lot of work with Accenture in a previous role, and we identified like 55 plus use cases for these 3D worlds. And the trick is trying to focus on like which are the top priorities, like out of those 55, which are the ones that we can actually build something for, like an event, for example, and kind of work towards these ongoing relationships. This kind of ties into another question. So as you're talking with brands, one of the things that I think is really challenging for people is figuring out how to like justify an ROI for a 3D world. So much of it is like an emotional thing where like when you put a headset on, you feel this sense of amazement. I talk about this on the podcast all the time, but I'm like the local VR guy. I've got in with Quest 1 is when I started my journey in this stuff. And, I always have had headsets laying around, and at game nights or like after a night out or whatever, like I put headsets on people and I let them try stuff as simple as Angry Birds or Beat Saber or whatever. And it's the same reaction every time. It's like this childlike giggle, this huge smile on their face, and they get super excited. And they're like, this is magical. Like whatever that was amazing. In business, it's the same way. People get this sense of wow, but then it's the so what? Like after the wow,
Mhm.
it's like, what do I use it for? Why is it worth investing in? It's like, what do you attach to that wow in order to justify the investment in these programs? And so I'm curious to get your take on that, on how you guys think about ROI or how you think about the justification of a business case.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, of course, I think it's a combination of all of those things, right? In some cases, to your point, it might just be, it might be purely educational. We haven't experienced VR. We heard there's all these different use cases. Like, what does it mean? Um, there's that, right? There's other instances where with just I'll use emerging technology as a blanket, right? Because it's the question, no matter the tech, right?
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
like
3D
there's
printing
new
has the same thing as VR does, right? Like all these things that are new require this difficult conversation.
AI as in, and it's like AI has been around for decades, and it's like people are shocked to learn that Pac-Man had AI. I'm like, everybody's experienced AI. Everybody's played Pac-Man. Like, I don't know anybody who hasn't played Pac-Man, right? And so,
Wait,
really just trying.
let's double click on that, because I personally didn't know that Pac-Man had AI, and I'm guessing a fair amount of the audience doesn't either. So, what's the AI in Pac-Man? Please inform me.
The ghost.
The ghosts?
Yeah.
Really? They use like
Yeah.
machine learning or something, or how did that work?
I'm telling. I'm gonna share something with you. But yes, but Pac-Man and I believe Space Invaders as well. I'm almost certain Space Invaders did too. But that's what's really incredible. So taking it back to like retro gaming, and then now, I mean, everything's possible now. And so I like to talk about the Pac-Man example because it makes it a little more tangible. And I'm using Pac-Man as an example for AI.
Mm-hmm.
So I think no matter what emerging technology you're talking about, I think it's important to ground it in reality, ground it into today. So, for example, recently we did some work with Meta, and we created a new product at Dentsu overall called Intelligent Messaging. Now, with that, it's a full suite of sort of AI powered messaging solutions, and you don't have to do them all. And we've created very easy and tangible ways to sort of test, learn, and explore the tech. And we really, again, applying that now near next approach. You don't have to do everything. When it comes to ROI, there's a number of different things. So with it could be engagement. So for example, intelligent messaging, we actually showcased it at CES, our current work that we did with Glenfiddich. And what was great about it is the first in the now phase, the POC that we did, it was tested at their employee conference. So again, creating that sort of safe space. What great feedback to get from employees who love the brand every day. They're going to be your biggest critics as well. And so really testing in a space. We sort of did some simple leveraging the screens in the event, for example, having like some of the printed materials around the event, very lightweight, low cost, to show that you can scan and launch sort of a one-to-one experience from any media, and then also collecting different data. So we were actually asking questions like, are you looking to gift? Is for Glenfiddich, right? So are you looking to gift? Are you entertaining, right? An event, are you just looking to treat yourself? And went through a couple of different scenarios. And then of course, you got to find out the Glenfiddich that was for you through that experience. But the cool part is we could go back and then say 70% of all attendees went through the full experience. That's incredible.
That's high.
From an
That's
engagement.
really, really high.
The full experience, like no drop-offs. Okay, amazing. And then we could also say like who was the Glenfiddich 12? Who was the Glenfiddich 15? And then through sort of meta marketing messages, when people opt in, we can send them messages to like, hey, Ricky, maybe you're a gifter, maybe I'm into entertaining, so we can tailor specific messages from that. But just by doing that POC alone, that gives you some data to work with and to see how the tech is applied, how it works. And we actually took a lot of those learnings and evolved it into sort of the next version of it, where instead of just answering questions, you could actually like scan the bottle and it would serve up recipes or food pairings. So, hey, if you want to make fruit cake or Dutch apple pie, I got you covered.
I love that. That's with food and beverage products. Like I love that connection of like seeing it as more than just your own product, like how your product integrates with the rest of someone's lifestyle. So like the pairings thing I think is amazing. But what I love about that example is that one of the benefits of digital, of like moving from like print advertising to digital advertising, is our insight into the buyer journey and our ability to personalize and curate the buyer journey so that it's more individualized. Like you want to have a journey where you're getting content that's relevant for you, insights that are relevant for you from the beginning to the end of those touch points. And what I think is very exciting about AR and VR, but also even I don't even know if I would consider this AR, but just like this, the comeback of QR codes and that interaction of being able to have your phone be a part of the physical experience. I think that this is a game changer because now you can get all those same benefits you've already been seeing with digital advertising in your brick and mortar business. Like one underserved example of this is menus at restaurants. During COVID, every restaurant got QR codes on the menu everywhere. You go, you scan your little QR code, and you even purchase through that QR code sometimes. We need to have tools that are A/B testing menus and moving menu items up to the top to see which ones convert better and have that be curated based on the experience of who is shopping at that restaurant. Like there's so many opportunities to play around with that. And I think that we're not seeing enough of it. And so I wonder, like this, obviously that was a great example there, but I'm wondering with some of the other work you're doing in brick and mortar, these physical experiences, what do you think the future of brick and mortar looks like? Like it seems like people are continuing to shop in those experiences, but what are some clever ways that we can change brick and mortar to be more engaging, better, like tie in that digital experience a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's a mix of things. I think for brands, having an experience in the store is key. Unless you're just, you have to differentiate yourself from just like, I'm going to go order it and have it shipped to my door. It's like, I don't know what envelopes. I don't know, something, something like, like that's not, you know, um, significant, but that you need. I don't know. um, but if it's something, you think about clothing, you think about the beauty industry, you think about sports, right? Like Dick's Sporting Goods. Like I have a blast in that place every time.
Yeah, they got
like,
like the little
you know,
they got little putter green, and they're very creative with it.
yeah. So I think creating that in-store creating a space and a place to go to. I think we all need that and want that to drive into brick and mortar. I think from a sort of connected experience standpoint, one of the things that we did is we created a product called Scan and Know. And that one was basically we created a contactless payment technology, that you could scan without an app. As we were testing it, we were seeing that people were like curious about ingredients. We were in a sort of soap and fragrance beauty store. And so with people having skin sensitivities, they were wanting to know what ingredients were in the different products. Um, and so we, kind of, okay, that's interesting, and sort of hung on to that. And then additionally, uh, we happened to be at a big box retailer. My son we were shopping. He has very particular about fabrics for, his skin. He found something he liked. They didn't have his size. We couldn't find anybody to find out where it is. And then, as you probably know, even if you try and go in and manually look it up, oftentimes it's like, I didn't want the fleece. I wanted the whatever, but it looks just like it, right? So what we did is we created Scan and Know, where you could actually, for example, say they don't have my size in a retailer, I can scan the barcode on the wrong size. It'll pull up the item, integrate it into the retailer's website. So again, we could integrate in the app too if they want, but it's not needed, flexible. So you can scan it, boom, have my size shipped to my door. The retailer keeps the sale. I get the jogging pants in my size or whatever sent to
Mhm.
my door. Everybody wins. And then we also created that for other things. Like I say, you could actually scan the item, and because that product page comes up, you can see like what ingredients and have that information at hand.
I love
Um,
that. I think that's huge, and it's interesting because like I expected more out of e-commerce brands. I'm hoping that more adopt tools like this. Like I saw you had shared a clip around that exact product, and I remember just like being jaw dropped watching this clip because I keep telling my friends I want to see more ideas like this, and I feel like there's a lack of them in the marketplace right now. But when you go to a shopping mall today versus going to a shopping mall 10 years ago, it looks really, really different. And the biggest difference that I've noticed is that all of the e-com brands that destroyed the brick and mortar brands are in malls now. When you go to a mall in San Diego, you're going to see Allbirds, Peloton, Tesla, Purple Mattress. Like it's all brands that blew up in the direct to consumer e-com boom. And now they're creating in-person showrooms to continue growing their presence and be able to take more of the market that doesn't shop as much online because people still want to hold things in person, but they haven't changed much, like there's still like these kind of just product showroom standard type stores. And I think they need tools like what you're describing to make it a better user experience, give people something that's evolved, modernized, and different. And I think that you guys have done a very good job of coming up with something that adds real value. So that's super cool. Just kudos to that.
Wow, thanks so much. Thank you.
Then let's see. I had another note here I wanted to jump into. What? Oh, there was this word because we talked about you've got this talk coming up at South by Southwest coming up here in March, and there was a word listed in the panel description: intrapreneurship. And this is like my new favorite word. I'm telling all my friends about it. I'm like, I can't believe I've never heard this word before. Like, I feel seen. Like, I've always worked within companies, but felt like this entrepreneur founder type within the company, trying to stretch, sometimes not the best politically because, you're taking on responsibilities that aren't always your own. So it can create some tension. But it's this thing that if you foster properly and you put some sort of structure around it, I think that you can get a cheat code out of some of your employees with this. And so I want to hear more about what this is. Can you tell us what intrapreneurship actually means, and talk to us a little bit about how you're fostering that culture, or thinking about that within Dentsu, or doesn't have to be Dentsu related, just entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome to the club.
Thank you.
um,
Thank you. I love it. It's such a good word.
um, yeah, yeah. Entrepreneurship, you described it beautifully. I mean, it is really, entrepreneurs, going out and creating your own business, and everything. Whereas entrepreneurship, it's almost like creating a business within a business, right? And that could be a new product, it could be a new service, it could be a net new, just like complete separate business within the business. But like you say, it is taking on that responsibility, right? And so there are similarities, but there are definitely differences. As an entrepreneur, you're fortunate to have sort of the backing and the tools of the larger organization and the network of the larger organization, and these sort of brilliant people to reach out to connect with, you know to even like team up with, or even be an advisor, as you're sort of developing things, right? And then it's also, like you said, just kind of like rolling up your sleeves, and it's like, okay, what is the business case? What is the opportunity, based on our kind of current business? Where is somewhere we can test this out, and validate it before we start rolling it out? How are we going to roll it out? What markets are we going to roll it out to? Um, and still, oftentimes, I think a lot of times people think like, oh, well, because you have the support of the big organization, you must have loads of budget and money just to Like, it is totally not the case at all, right? When you're an entrepreneur, it is still being scrappy, it's still being lean and mean. It's still like having a ton of resilience, right? Because there's a lot of no's and, virtual door slams or whatever you want to call it, um, to problem solve or to think about, or that might inspire, taking your product or solution into a different way. Um, and I think also to part of your question, I think part of it is really trying to bring together the stakeholders up front, identifying those key people up front. When you are thinking about whatever it is you're creating, like I say, a new product, service, or net new business in your organization, it's upfront thinking about, as I mentioned, business case, problem to solve. Who, like, okay, if this catches on and we're, our hypothesis is right, who's actually going to develop this? Like, where is this? Like, you have to think about that. When, not if, when this is a success, who's actually going to deliver it? How are we going to go to market? Who are the partners that we might want to integrate up front as we're building this thing out? What did, how can we support each other to, accelerate that effort? So these are like, I've got even more questions that we really try and map out up front, but we really try and do that groundwork up front, still moving quickly, by the way. We always are like, so we're at this, we may have like an interesting technology we're tinkering with, but we're still like looking to answer those questions so that, we can actually realize and take it beyond just like a cool demo in the corner into an actual, like, revenue driving, opportunity that hopefully makes, people's lives a little easier, better, more joyful, all
Well, do,
that.
do you have so I have two different lenses that I want to get your perspective on with this. The first one is from the lens of the entrepreneur. So let's say that I'm a junior to mid-level employee at like a really massive company, and I see some key pain points related to my role or my department, and I really want to own this new program or like champion it and move it forward. It's so one of the pieces of advice that you just kind of mentioned was like building a committee, almost like finding who the stakeholders are that need to be involved in that, like who do you need to collaborate with. But do you have any other advice on getting started, like if someone has that spark in them where they want to take on that project, like what's the first couple steps that they should do to introduce that new idea?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend doing some homework. You don't have to have it all figured out, but, being able, it's almost like the old school 5 W's and an H: who, what, how, when, where, why, right?
Totally.
So really kind of like looking at that, um, and also keeping the old school thread going, because we talk about old and new here, Ricky. Is that is like the WIFM, what's in it for me, or
Mm,
what's in it for the blank consumer,
love that
team,
question.
etc.
That's
Right?
a very common question we ask externally as companies, where we think about what's in it for our customer, how do we position to them or whatever. But internally, this concept of internal selling, I think, is a really important topic. It's kind of crucial to this idea of entrepreneurship. You're instead of pitching VCs, you're pitching internal management to be able to fund your project or give you the resources you need. So that what's in it for them, what's in it for your manager, what's in it for the other team you need to support that. I think that question right there is so important, and people don't instinctually get to that question, I don't think, because they're so focused on how do I solve the problem that I have this one idea for, instead of does that impact all the other people I need to bring into that project.
Exactly. And I would say internal and external, right? So like you say, what does it mean for the team? What does it mean, for like what does it mean for our business? What does it mean for our client's business? What does it mean for the end customer? Like even that example I was telling you with Scan and Know, like, okay, now I can just have it shipped to my door. I'm good now. Like, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
this kind of well-rounded why. Would you recommend that? Is that something that should be written down in like a document or like a visual presentation, or How should that be communicated, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've used both. We have we'll typically kind of have a collaborative sort of input that we'll work on with those key stakeholders sort of up front, and just to kind of answer some of those key questions. And then, as you said, internally selling, right, is your sort of, putting your idea out there, getting feedback from people is so key. And so being able just to even have like a simple slide that says that, then it's like, oh, okay, wow, you're really thinking about this. Okay. And then people can start talking like, oh, well, what about this? Or, have you talked to the training team? Or, oh, wow, our client, that's a great case for them, but there's this other, and, that way you can start having those conversations and really inspiring people. What I would say, like, a don't is, just kind of saying, oh, I've got a great idea. Cause like ideas are, you know,
Yeah,
like,
execution is
you
so
know,
important.
so many, yeah, like, and some, yeah, everybody's got ideas, but like, what are you going to do about it? What does it mean to the business? What does it mean to the customer? What's the plan to
Yeah,
make it happen?
a huge mistake I've made in the past, and that I like to think I've gotten better at this. I hope that I've gotten better at this. Is assuming there's reasons it hasn't happened yet and look for those reasons. So like if I have a new idea for why the business should change or do something better, I try to think of like the top 5 reasons why that's a bad idea. Like could there be something I'm not seeing that if this idea happened, there'd be an unintended consequence that causes us to not be able to do it. And usually I'm pretty bad at finding those, and I need to talk to a manager or a mentor or somebody above me that sees stuff from above the trees that I'm not seeing. And usually that helps me get to those answers a lot faster, at least from what I've experienced in these kind of new ideas for changing orgs. I want to ask you about the other lens though. So we talked about from the entrepreneur's perspective, but in a big company, these entrepreneurs are like amazing little gold stars within the organization that could create so much impact above the standard average employee. Like they have these big ideas, they take ownership, they're willing to wear multiple hats. There's a lot of value when you can find those employees and foster and build them up, and they could be your future leaders and senior executives within the org someday. As an organization, how do you go about fostering a culture that accepts entrepreneurs, and how do you identify and kind of find them to bring them in and kind of give them the resources they need?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, personally, I've had a phenomenal experience at Dentsu. Um, and, and in terms of, um, I started out at a company called Live Area that was acquired by Merkle, who's part of Dentsu. And, is given a lot of autonomy. Again, we have to make sure it's proving all the things we said, proving a business case and all of that. But like I personally had a lot of growth in the org in the time that I've been here, because of it's kind of what you said, is like talking with different people in the organization, like getting input from different leaders across the organization. Dentsu's a massive company and we have a lot of smart people, and so I think part of it's just like internally networking, getting involved in sort of new business pitches or, key accounts. How can you add value, And then I think in terms of that's what my experience has been. It's been fantastic. And then in terms of like other talent in our org, we in our team, we have some phenomenal leaders and working, I like to say everybody has their own superpower. So we even have different people in different pockets in our org and in our own team and in our org who have brilliant capabilities, but just need like a little bit of guidance or guardrails or direction. And then, then they're flourishing on whatever the thing is that we're working on. So, for me personally, I try and help or guide. I don't have a massive team of people who report to me, or anything like that. But, I think any smart, talented people, I always try and help. And with a company like Dentsu, there's so many different brands, so many different opportunities to team up. And so like that's been a really great thing of like working, with a mix of people, expertise, talent, knowledge base, where we can all learn from each other. And then you get on a project together, and then maybe you end up on the same team together.
I feel like we could have a whole separate conversation just dedicated to internal collaboration and human to human connection, and like these new tools that we've talked about around like immersion and engagement. Like one of the biggest drivers that I think it's done for businesses is it's allowed us to have more distributed teams where we can collaborate globally, remote or hybrid or whatever. I'm not talking about in an office or at home. I'm talking more just like you could have a team in Japan, a team in Ireland, and a team in the US all talking to each other, working asynchronously, getting into 3D spaces and sharing collaboration tools together. Like there's this superpower that we're developing on being able to find people all over the world to work together, which I think is really special. But now that the next step is like, how do we make it easier for those connections to happen? Like if I want to talk to experts in VR in my company and I've never worn a headset before, like how do I find that tree, that pathway to find those people? How do I jump in an internal community, either on like a MS Teams channel or something, where I can be surrounded by those people and hear their insights and what they're working on? And I think that internal transparency and trying to find ways to foster that, that's kind of this next step that I think it's one of the biggest leverage points for big companies. Because I mean, when you're talking about having thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes of employees around the world, at the end of the day, that's what a company is. It's a group of people all working towards a shared mission, a shared goal, and you have to find ways to enable them to work together as best you can. It's the biggest cost. It's the biggest value proposition within a company is the people. So that's amazing that Dentsu's done a good job of that and given you that pathway to be able to kind of find your role there.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I mean, Dentsu's fantastic, and we really have like kind of a one Dentsu approach. Like some of those examples you were just saying, I'm like, because that's what we do. I'm fortunate. I work with our team in Japan, and and there's people in Australia, and there's people in the UK, and in Germany, and all over the place in Brazil, all over the place. Italy, these like are all people in different places that I've been fortunate to team up with. We haven't all met in person, but some of them we have. But we're having that shared experience. We're ideating together. We're creating, whatever the thing is, that we're doing with Scan and Know. We actually created that with the team in UK, India, and then US, and Dentsu NXT Space. That was like Australia, Brazil, US, and then with the intelligent messaging with Meta, UK, US, India, teams in Japan. So
It's
everywhere.
it's amazing. It's really is. I mean, it's a huge transition that the whole world's going through right now, especially if you're in knowledge working roles or office jobs, whatever description of it you want to put onto it. There's a massive transition happening. We're going away from this 9 to 5, 40-hour work week style to where the reality is we've all got our jobs on our phones. So Saturday afternoon, I still have emails. Like it's not like it goes away. I check out, I do other things. Like I don't work 24/7, but when you're working globally with different time zones and you have so much access to those work tools, we kind of all are working 24/7 as far as someone in the company is doing something. We're interconnected where a quick message can be sent here or there. And so I think there's a new format that we haven't mastered the playbook around yet. And there's a new set of tools for that. There's new processes for that. Had a great chat with my buddy at Miro about this because that's a big thing that they're enabling with their tool sets. And I'm excited to see how leaders like you and your team continue to push those boundaries and find ways to create that new playbook. Because 10 years from now, we're going to be looking back and we're not going to be saying there's no playbook. We're going to be saying that was a transition period and this is the way things are now, the same way we looked 20 years ago and there wasn't an internet for the workplace as a standard, so it's exciting. I think we're at a very important pivotal moment in where technology is going. I know we're kind of getting close to time, so I want to talk a little bit about South by Southwest before we wrap up. So I know that you're on the advisory board for South by Southwest. You're on an upcoming panel around designing the future, how innovators and creating what's next with some other amazing speakers from big brands as well. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what's your role with the event and what's coming up in this panel?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been so fortunate to be on the South by advisory board for a number of years now, mainly on the innovation advisory board. So folks who are submitting and showcasing at the innovation showcase. And it's one of my favorite things because there's so many different categories, so many different technologies, and so many brilliant people and companies, big and small, from all over the world. And you see it could be a prototype or something that's like going into market tomorrow. So you really get to see all of it. It's usually like about 65, 55-ish different companies all in a room. I mean, I definitely come out inspired, excited and new collaborators with that. I've also been on the South by Pitch advisory board. So similarly, seeing a lot of these sort of early stage startups mostly who are submitting into Pitch, and Pitch does a great job of really, empowering those folks who, ultimately when they get a lot of notoriety, exposure, and, funding because of the awareness. So just being a part of that process is phenomenal. Now, the other part of your question, or the talk itself, right? Designing the future, how innovators are creating what's next. I'm so excited because we are going to have Chris Down, who's the chief design officer at Mattel, and really sharing, his perspective and stories. Phil Sage from PepsiCo, he's in their North America Design Innovation Hub. And then Matthew Loren from Google, who heads up their sort of lab spaces. So just some really phenomenal innovators with different brands, experiences. And we're gonna talk about their stories, really highlighting on, what it takes to innovate, real world examples on pioneering the future and kind of getting a glimpse on what everybody's sort of working on at the moment. And then of course, we all want to know what does the future hold? What's next? So those are some of the key beats that we're going to be highlighting. Anybody going to South by, come see our talk. And then I'd love to stay connected with anybody on LinkedIn.
Perfect. We'll put some links down in the description so it's easy for people to keep track, but otherwise that's the pod.
I met a